rain came through the roof of the old council chamber as though the sky itself had been waiting years to enter. It fell in silver threads through the torn stonework, over the cracked mosaic of the Jedi crest, over the chairs where masters had once sat in judgment, over the scorch marks left by war and silence. Dantooine had always seemed too gentle for ruin. The plains rolled away beyond the temple like a sea of sleeping grass, and even now, after bombardment and looting and years of fear, the wind still moved with a softness that made destruction feel almost ashamed of itself. Mitra Surik stood at the center of the chamber and listened. Not to the rain. Not to the groan of the damaged rafters. Not to the distant movements of the salvagers and settlers who had dared return to the old enclave because she had told them the darkness was passing. She listened for the force. Once, there had been nothing. Once, after Malachor, the universe had become a sealed room. Every living thing had stood beyond glass. Every cry had been muffled. Every star had looked cold. She had carried the absence inside her like a wound that would never close, and the Jedi who survived had looked upon that wound with fear. They had called her Exile because it was easier than calling her Proof. Now the chamber breathed. She felt Visas Mar kneeling behind her, blind eyes turned toward memories only she could see. She felt Bowdur's quiet grief, steady and hidden beneath obedience. She felt Atten Rand leaning against a fractured archway as though indifference could still save him from caring too much. She felt Michael beyond the entrance with the settlers, speaking gently to frightened children whose parents remembered the Jedi only as ghosts and generals. She felt Brianna moving through the training yard, bare feet on wet stone, measuring the ruins as if they were an enemy whose weakness could be found. She felt Mira on the outer wall, pretending to watch for threats while really watching for reasons to stay. They were not the Jedi Order. Not yet. They were pieces left over after a blade had shattered. Some had cut others. Some had been cut. None were clean. But the Force moved through them. Not like a command from some distant throne. Not like the cold certainty the old masters had often mistaken for wisdom. It moved through them like rain finding every crack in a broken floor. Bowdur stepped beside her, the small remote hovering near his shoulder with a soft mechanical hum. His face bore the same calm it always did, the kind men learned when they had stood too close to the end of worlds and survived by becoming useful. "The projector will hold," he said, "for a little while." Mitra looked toward the center of the chamber where a pale blue image flickered above the ruined floor. The hollow was unstable, eaten at the edges by static, but the shapes were clear enough. Dantooine, Telos, Nar Shaddaa, Onderon, Korriban, and beyond them a republic that had been bled white by wars and barely understood. "So will we," she said. Atten gave a humorless laugh from the archway. "That's usually what people say right before the roof finishes falling in." "It will not fall," Bowdur said. "You checked." "I listened." Atten glanced up. "Great. The roof has a physician." "Nani, Nemdei, Na, Dermi Seerer." Mitra almost smiled. Almost. There had been a time when she would have mistaken laughter for disrespect. But Attone's mockery had always been a shield held backward, protecting the wound rather than the body. He had followed her from Paragus to Telos, from Nar Shaddaa to Malachor, and every step had cost him another lie about who he was. If he still joked in ruins, it meant he had not surrendered to them. Visas rose from where she knelt. Her veil was dark with rain, her posture composed, but the force around her carried a tremor that only Mitra could feel. Visas had known another kind of absence, one that devoured worlds and called itself hunger. To stand in a Jedi chamber, even a broken one, demanded courage. "The dead are not silent here," Visas said. "No," Mitra answered. "They are waiting to see what we do with their failure." The words settled harder than she expected. Bowdur lowered his eyes. Atten stopped pretending not to listen. For years, the Jedi Order had hidden behind caution until caution became cowardice. It had watched Mandalore burn worlds, watched Revan rise, watched the Republic beg, and when the moment came to choose, it had chosen patience while soldiers chose graves. Then, when those soldiers returned carrying victory and damage in equal measure, the Order had judged the damage more fiercely than the war that caused it. Mitra had once believed obedience was the shape of virtue. Then she had obeyed at Malachor. The echo of that choice would never leave her. The mass shadow generator. The Mandalorian fleet dragged screaming into gravity's fist. Republic ships crushed beside enemies. Jedi, soldiers, Mandalorians, all vanishing into one wound in the Force so vast that even now, years later, she sometimes woke with her hands clenched around nothing, certain she could still feel every life falling through her. No order rebuilt from denial would survive. No order rebuilt from pride deserved to. Michael entered quietly, robes damp from the courtyard. He had the look of a scholar who had become a witness against his will, gentle eyes shadowed by things no archive could hold. "The settlers are gathered," he said. "Some came to listen. Some came to make certain we leave. Nay, not I." "Good," Mitra said. Atten straightened. "Good? If they trust too quickly, they have learned nothing." A stir passed through them. Not disagreement. Understanding, perhaps. Or the beginning of it. Mitra turned toward the old council seats. The highest chair, where Master Vrook had once sat like a blade wrapped in robes, was cracked down the middle. Kavar's seat was scorched. Zezkael's had fallen backward, half buried under stone dust. They had been wise, each in their way. Brave, each in their hour. But wisdom that could not bend had broken, and bravery that arrived too late had become another kind of grief. She climbed the shallow steps and stood before the seats, not above her companions but among the ghosts. "We are not here to restore what was," she said. Her voice moved through the chamber, low but clear. It carried into the halls where settlers waited, into the rain, into the stones that remembered too much. The Jedi Order died before its last masters fell. It died when compassion became policy instead of action. It died when fear of the dark became fear of life. It died when we taught children to surrender attachment before teaching them how to love without possession. It died when war came, and the Order could not decide whether the suffering of the galaxy mattered more than the purity of its own hands. No one interrupted. Even Atten was still. Mitra felt the words cutting through her as they left her. She had not planned them. Plans belonged to generals, and she had been one once. This had to be something else. Not strategy, not confession. A vow drawn from bone. "We will not rebuild that order." The hollow flickered, throwing blue light over her face. "We will build one that remembers why the first Jedi listened to the Force at all. Not to rule, not to withdraw, not to win arguments in empty chambers while others die beyond the walls. We will serve. We will learn. We will protect where protection is needed, heal where healing is possible, and fight only when refusal would abandon the innocent." Brianna appeared at the entrance, silent as falling snow. Mira came in behind her with arms folded, rain beads caught in her red hair. The settlers gathered beyond them. Farmers, mechanics, widows, children, old militiamen, people who had seen banners change but hunger remain. They looked at Mitra as if the word Jedi were a blade whose edge they did not yet trust. They were right not to. Mitra descended the steps. "There will be no council of hidden masters," she said. "No child taken without memory of home. No student taught that emotion is a disease. No knight sent to war without being taught what war will ask of the soul. No exile for wounds we do not understand." Her gaze moved to each of them. "Those who train here will learn the blade, but they will also learn hunger, law, medicine, language, grief, and repair. They will work beside the people they claim to protect. They will answer to the Republic when justice demands law, and they will refuse the Republic when law becomes cruelty. We will be servants of the Force, not ornaments of the sin." A murmur passed through the settlers. Suspicion remained, but something else moved beneath it. Not faith. Faith was too large. Perhaps relief. Perhaps the faint, dangerous hope that power might kneel. Atun's expression had changed. He looked at her not as a soldier looks at a general, nor as a fool looks at a miracle, but as a man who had spent years expecting every door to close and had suddenly seen one remain open. "And who leads this not order?" he asked softly. Mitra looked back at the broken council seats. "No one alone." Mira snorted. "That sounds like a good way to make sure nothing gets done." "Then you will make sure we move." "I didn't volunteer." "You came inside." Mira opened her mouth, closed it, then looked away with a scowl that fooled no one. Mitra turned to Visas. "You will teach listening beyond sight." Visas bowed her head. "To Baldur, I ask the teaching of consequence. Machines, systems, war, repair. Students must know that every choice has weight." Baldur's mechanical arm flexed once, faint light glowing in its joints. "Yes, General." She did not correct him. Not this time. To Brianna, discipline. Not obedience, discipline. The difference may save lives. Brianna placed a fist over her heart. To Michael, history without worship. Michael's eyes shone faintly. "I will serve." Atun shifted uncomfortably before she even looked at him. To Atun, survival, deception. The ways hunters think. The ways good people become prey. The ways a person returns from what he has done. His face hardened. For one heartbeat he seemed ready to flee the chamber, the planet, the name Jedi itself. Then his jaw tightened. "That lesson's ugly." "Yes. Students might not like it. They are not here to like truth." He swallowed. "Fine. But I'm not wearing robes. No one asked you to." Mira laughed once, and the sound broke something open. Even a few settlers smiled. Mitra faced them all again. "This place will not be called a temple," she said. "Temples invite worship. This will be an enclave in the old language only because the stones already know the word. But its purpose will be shelter, training, judgment when needed, mercy when possible, and when Revan returns." The name passed through the chamber like a storm wind through grass. Some of the settlers crossed themselves in old habits. Baldur looked down. Atun's eyes sharpened. Visas grew very still. Revan. Savior. Butcher. Jedi. Sith. Prodigal knight. Vanished king of an unfinished war. Mitra had followed Revan once into fire because the Republic was dying and the Jedi would not move. Later, she had followed the wound Revan left behind through every shadow of the galaxy. Now Revan was somewhere beyond the known stars, chasing a darkness older than the Mandalorians, older than Malak, perhaps older than the Republic's pride. "When Revan returns," Mitra continued, "he will not find an order waiting to condemn him, worship him, or obey him blindly. He will find people capable of standing beside him, and if needed, standing against him." No thunder answered. No vision opened in the Force. No ancient bell rang. Only rain. Only breath. Only broken people in a broken chamber choosing, with no certainty at all, to become something better than what had failed them. Mitra stepped down into the center of the room and extended her hand. One by one they came forward. Visas first, placing her hand over Mitra's with the reverence of someone who had seen emptiness and chosen life anyway. Baldur next, his human hand warm, his mechanical one held back, as if afraid to profane the vow with metal. Mitra caught the metal wrist and drew it in too. Brianna placed her hand with solemn strength. Michael with quiet wonder. Mira with reluctance bright enough to be loyalty in disguise. Atun last, after a long hesitation, his hands scarred and trembling. Beyond them, a little girl from the settlement stepped into the chamber. Her mother tried to pull her back, but the child resisted with the blunt courage of the very young. "Are you going to teach people to move things with their minds?" she asked. Atun looked at the ceiling. "That's what always gets them." Mitra knelt before the child. "What is your name?" "Lysa Torta." "Lysa," Mitra said. "We are going to teach people when not to." The child considered this. Then, with grave seriousness, she nodded, as if that answer was stranger and better than magic. Mitra rose. Outside, the rain began to ease. Pale sunlight touched the far fields of Dantooine, uncertain but present. The old stones glimmered. In the cracked mosaic beneath their feet, water gathered in the broken lines of the Jedi crest until it no longer looked like a symbol shattered, but a seed filled with light. Far beyond Dantooine, beyond the Republic's wounded borders, beyond charts and beacons and the last confident maps of civilized space, something turned its attention toward them. It did not yet know their names, but it felt, across the dark, that where there had been only ashes, a small fire had been lit. The first students did not arrive as pilgrims. They came as fugitives, orphans, thieves, failed soldiers, frightened mechanics, daughters of farmers, sons of smugglers, children with dreams that bent spoons and nightmares that cracked windows. Some came because the Force had begun to move in them and there was nowhere else to go. Some came because parents feared what the Republic might do if another war began, and their children were found untrained. Some came because rumors had spread that the Jedi had returned different, and desperate people were always willing to gamble on different. Mitra accepted none of them quickly. This troubled Michael at first. He believed in records, interviews, tests of sensitivity and temperament. Brianna favored trials of discipline. Bao-Dur preferred observation during labor, claiming a person revealed more while repairing a evaporator than while answering questions about virtue. Mira insisted you could judge any student by how they behaved around food when they thought no one important was watching. Atten said the best test was to leave a credit pouch unattended, then see who stole it, who reported it, who watched someone else steal it, and who replaced the credits with a note criticizing the quality of the trap. Mitra listened to every method and trusted none alone. The old order had measured potential like ore. It had searched children for strength in the Force, then shaped them toward doctrine before they had names large enough to resist. Mitra would not build another furnace for souls. So the students waited. They worked the fields with the settlers. They hauled stone from fallen wings of the Enclave. They scrubbed soot from walls. They learned to dress burns, clean filters, mend boots, and cook for those who could not cook for themselves. They watched Bao-Dur dismantle a broken moisture regulator and explain how one cracked valve could starve 3 homes. They watched Michael lay out maps of the Mandalorian wars and speak not of campaigns first, but of refugee routes, supply lines, burned harvests, and the politics of delay. They watched Visa sit beside the dying and listen without offering easy comfort. They watched Brianna train until sweat froze along her jaw in the cold morning air. They watched Mira catch a boy stealing bread and give him 2 loaves on the condition that he help her find the 3 others who were hungrier than he was. They watched Atten teach cards. That had caused the first argument. "You cannot teach gambling as Jedi instruction," Michael said, standing in the courtyard with rain dripping from the edge of his hood. Atten sat at an overturned crate, surrounded by 6 students and a deck so worn the corners had gone soft. "I'm not teaching gambling. I'm teaching probability lies, fear responses, and how not to look like a nerf walking into a butcher's shop." Capi. You are teaching them to cheat. I am teaching them to notice cheating. Totally different moral category. One of the students, a solemn Rhodian girl named Tivi, raised her hand. "He is also teaching us to cheat." Atten pointed at her. Advanced noticing. Michael looked to Mitra for rescue, but Mitra only watched the students. Their faces were alive with concentration. Not greed. Not cruelty. They were learning to read hands, breath, rhythm, hesitation. They were learning that danger often smiled before it struck. "Continue," Mitra said. Michael stared. "You cannot be serious." "I am often serious." "Painfully," Atten added. Mitra ignored him. "But the lesson ends with each student explaining when deception protects life and when it corrodes trust." Atten grimaced. "There it is. Homework. You really are rebuilding the Jedi." "No," Mitra said. "I am making sure you are." It became a pattern. Every skill had a shadow, and every shadow had to be named. Brianna taught the students to fight with staves before they touched a training saber. She taught footwork in silence, balance in snow, patience under insult. But after every session, she required them to bind the bruises they had given one another. A student who struck hard but tended wounds carelessly repeated the lesson. A student who apologized without changing technique repeated it twice. Mira taught pursuit. Not the glorious chase of heroes and songs, but the ugly mathematics of hunting and being hunted. Broken twigs, displaced dust, false trails, the difference between hiding and disappearing. Then she took the students into the settlement and made them help repair doors, because every hunter eventually had to decide whether they were making people safer or merely better at fear. Bao-Dur taught machines with the tenderness other men reserve for prayer. The students learned that a lightsaber was not a badge, but a circuit of discipline, crystal, pressure, alignment, and consequence. He made them build water pumps before weapon hilts. When one impatient boy asked when they would learn to make blades, Bao-Dur handed him a burned motivator from an old battle droid. "When you can tell me why this failed," he said. The boy frowned. "It got shot." Bao-Dur's faint smile carried more sorrow than amusement. "Everything in war gets shot. That is not the answer." Visas taught them in darkness. She blindfolded those with sight and brought them into the lower halls where the enclave stones still held cold. Some panicked. Some boasted, then panicked more quietly. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her voice seemed to come from everywhere. "Do not reach for the Force as if it is a servant," she told them. "Be still enough to be found." One human girl, Sarah, ripped off her blindfold after only a few breaths. "I can't. There's too much." Visas knelt before her. "Then do not call it too much. Call it many." "What difference does that make?" "Too much is an enemy. Many is a world." The girl wept then, not because Visas had comforted her, but because she had not lied. Mitra, watching from the doorway, felt something in the Force turn gently around them, like soil accepting rain. Not all stayed. Some left after a week, offended that Jedi training involved kitchen duty. Some left after lessons stirred memories they had buried under anger. Some were sent away with kindness because the Enclave could not help what they needed, and Mitra refused to confuse recruitment with mercy. A boy from Telos with rare strength in the Force tried to dominate weaker students during meditation, pressing his will against theirs until one fainted. The old order might have hidden the incident, corrected him in private, feared losing talent. Mitra brought him before the teachers and students together. The boy stood pale and furious in the courtyard. "I didn't hurt her," he said. The girl he had touched sat near Visas, still shaking. "You entered where you were not invited," Mitra said. "I was stronger." "Yes." The word struck harder than condemnation. Mitra stepped closer. "And strength without reverence is hunger wearing a crown." His mouth twisted. "So exile me." The courtyard went silent. Mitra felt Atten watching her, felt Bao-Dur's grief stir, felt the old council chamber behind them full of ghosts who had once thought exile was a clean answer. "No," she said. The boy blinked. "You will not train with students until the one you harmed chooses whether she can share space with you. You will work in the settlement under Mira. You will eat last. You will attend Visas's lessons, but you will not touch another mind. You will write what you did, what you wanted, what you feared, and what you believe strength is for. When you can answer without making yourself the center of the wound." His fury cracked, revealing terror beneath. "And if I can't?" then we will still not abandon you to become someone else's weapon. Later, Aden found Mitra near the outer wall, watching dust gather over the plains. You know, he said, some people would call that soft. Some people have caused enough damage. He leaned beside her. He could be dangerous. He already is. That's not comforting. It was not meant to be. Aden studied her. The wind pulled at his jacket. He had grown leaner in the months since Malachor, less restless in his movements, though restlessness still lived behind his eyes like a trapped animal. You really think people can come back from anything? He asked. Mitra looked toward the training yard, where the boy from Tellus was stacking stones under Mira's sharp supervision. No. Aden's expression shifted. I think some things cannot be undone, she said. Some doors close, some dead remain dead, some harms become part of the world's shape. She paused. But I do not think the future belongs only to the worst thing a person has done. Aden looked away. Below them, the students gathered around a cooking fire. Brianna corrected someone's posture even as they stirred stew. Michael read from a datapad while pretending not to enjoy the children interrupting him. Baldur repaired a heater with 3 apprentices watching his hands. Visa sat slightly apart, face turned toward the flames she could not see, while one of the younger students described their color to her in careful detail. It was not the Jedi Order of old. There were no grand processions, no marble halls, no council decrees from Coruscant, no illusion that wisdom descended from high places. There was mud on robes that were not truly robes, smoke in everyone's hair, arguments over ration distribution, and a rule carved above the kitchen door in Mira's rough hand. If you can lift a lightsaber, you can wash a bowl. Mitra loved it more than she had expected. That frightened her. Attachment, the old masters would have warned. Possession, fear of loss. The first step toward the dark. But standing there, watching broken people become necessary to one another, Mitra understood what the old order had forgotten. Love did not become darkness because it existed. It became darkness when chained to control, when twisted into ownership, when fear made a prison of devotion. To love and still allow freedom, to grieve and still choose service, to fear loss and still refuse domination. This was not the enemy of the light. It was the work of living. The first formal gathering took place at Winter's Edge. There were 23 students by then, not children alone, though the youngest was 9 and the oldest had white in his beard. Mitra refused to make age a gate. The Force moved when it moved. Life wounded when it wounded. Learning did not belong only to the young. They gathered in the courtyard beneath a sky bruised purple with evening. No one wore ceremonial robes. No one carried a real blade. Before each student lay an object they had repaired or made: a water seal, a field brace, a carved wooden bowl, a stitched cloak, a restored censer, a toy speeder for a child in the settlement. Mitra stood before them with her companions arrayed not behind her, but among the students. The old order began training by asking what you could become, she said. We begin by asking whom you are willing to serve. One by one, the students stepped forward and named their work. Tivi, the Rhodian girl, had repaired a ration scale so the settlement could measure grain fairly. Sarah had made a cloak for an old woman whose sons had died in the war. The boy from Telos, whose name was Joran, had rebuilt the door of the girl he had harmed. He did not look at her when he said it. He looked at the ground. But he did not excuse himself, and when he finished, the girl gave the smallest nod. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the first stone on a road. At the end, Mitra drew her lightsaber. Its blade hissed to life, silver white in the dusk. The students inhaled as one. For many, it was the first true saber they had seen outside stories and nightmares. This is not your soul, she said. It is not your rank. It is not proof that you are wise. It is a tool that can defend life or end it. If you crave it, you are not ready. If you fear it, you may not be ready. If you understand that both craving and fear must be faced honestly, then one day you may carry it well. She lowered the blade until its light touched the repaired objects at the student's feet. "Until then, these are your first lightsabers," Atten muttered. "That line is going to haunt us." But his voice was thick. The students bowed, awkwardly, unevenly, beautifully. Above them, the first stars appeared. From the edge of the courtyard, unnoticed by most, T3M4 rolled out of the shadows. The little astromech had been restless all day, chirping at sealed files and old frequencies. Now it stopped beside Mitra and projected a burst of static.